Yesterday, I put up a poll in the channel that included some of the most commonly brought up issues with the game, and then asked you guys which of them was the biggest issue facing the game to date. Surprisingly, especially since I included subs in this poll, matchmaking absolutely dominated the poll, and this is sitting at just under 4,000 votes as of right now. So, let's talk about matchmaking. Now, matchmaking is the mechanic that takes a group of players sitting in the queue after they hit the battle button and puts them together in a match. So, it is literally the thing that is responsible for your team's player composition. And of course, that can have a massive impact on your experience in that match. You could get a great group of players and have a pretty easy win. You could also get a not so great group of players and get absolutely rolled over by the enemy team. Or you could get a pretty balanced group of players on both sides and have a nice, close match. If you were to ask, most of the players who cite matchmaking as the game's current biggest issue will blame it for the mismatch in skill level between the players on either team. You see, many players run a mod that allow them to see the personal rating of all the players in that match. The personal rating, or PR, is a number that is calculated based on the stats of the player by a third-party website. So this is not something that is calculated by Wargaming. What these players find is that, at times, one team will be stacked with players that have high PRs, while the other team is stacked with players that have low PRs. So one team is good, one team is not so good. So clearly, if these teams are so unevenly stacked, it has to be matchmaking, right? Like, it has to be the matchmaker that's doing it. Well, not exactly. You see, World of Warships Matchmaker does not take personal skill level into account for random battles. There are a variety of parameters that it does take into account, and we'll get to those in a second. But individual player skill level is not one of them. It is a true random batch of players that you're getting matched with both on your team and the enemy team. Now, you might be asking, well, why do some teams get so stacked with bad or good players? Well, I'd ask you this. Does it not happen in other games? Because it most certainly does from my experience. Most games take a pretty similar approach when it comes to multiplayer matchmaking. Just get a group of players together and dump them into a match. I played an unhealthy amount of Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 during my high school and college years, right? And I cannot tell you the number of times we were pushed back to our default spawn and just stuck there for the rest of the match. We would give up, grab some snipers, and just try to snipe out of our spawn into the rest of the map. Or the amount of times we did that to the enemy team. Same with other games, even these tiered vehicular combat games like War Thunder. How many times have you found yourself getting trapped in spawn in War Thunder ground? It happens a fair amount every time I sit down to work on my Abrams grind. So, it's just kind of a fact of random multiplayer matchmaking that these matches will occur from time to time, because naturally some players are going to get dumped onto one side that are just highly skilled altogether, and sometimes you'll have the same thing happen except with lower skilled players. Now, while some say that this is a reason for skill-based matchmaking to be implemented to try and balance these out, newer games like the newer Call of Duties do actually have that. And that brings about a whole other set of problems, like Smurfing, where you tank your stats just so you can get matched with a bunch of lower skilled players and become, John Wick for a couple of rounds or something like that. And if you look into it, it seems that most players don't really enjoy having to go super sweaty in every match they get into. So there is that argument for sure. Now, I do think that there are some issues with the current matchmaker, especially with the direction that the game is going in. You see, from what Wargaming tells us via the wiki and How It Works video series, we know exactly what the matchmaker does take into account. And I'll link to the wiki page of the How It Works video if you want to dive deeper into it, but I'm just going to give a very brief overview here. Essentially, all the matchmaker takes into consideration when putting together two teams is ship tier and ship type. That's it. Now, there are a number of soft parameters around this that can change depending upon how much time has been spent in the matchmaking queue, as short queue times are a priority. For example, for the first 24 seconds of queue time, there's a soft limit of 1 sub per side. But after those 24 seconds are up, 2 subs are now allowed per side. Parameters like this exist for tier limitations and discrepancies between ship classes for each side. Ideally, the matchmaker tries to mirror the class and tier spread for each team. So if Team A has 3 Tier 10 cruisers and 2 Tier 9 cruisers, so should Team B. Again, this is a very brief overview of how matchmaking works, so please feel free to check out the wiki page and how it works video for an in-depth explanation. But that is, again, essentially how it works. So on to the issues I see with matchmaking. As the game has developed, things have gotten a little imaginative, shall we say, with the game. We have ships that kind of blur the lines between classes now, like the Aegir, Stalingrad, Yoshino, the entire Elbing line, etc. We have straight up hybrid ships that are half carrier, half battleship, cruiser, or destroyer, again like the Kearsarge, the Commissar, and the Halford now. Then of course, combat instructions are becoming more and more common on tech line ships, like with the San Martin and such. Not to mention radar and hydro. Point being is that these characteristics give these ships huge advantages, right? And while it's true that these ships are balanced around these characteristics, it still stings when one side gets 4 radar cruisers and your side gets 1. Or when one side has a Midway and 2 Louisianas on top of that, while your side has a Richthofen and no hybrid ships. We've all seen it happen, and it is quite frustrating. However, again, it is random battles, and sometimes the goofiness matchmaking puts together can be fun. Like how sometimes you'll get, a no battleship game or a no DD game, or sometimes you'll get like 6 DDs for some reason. So yeah, if you play late enough at night, goofy stuff happens with the matchmaker, right? But if Wargaming is going to continue to put these hybrid ships into the game, shouldn't they have their own parameter in matchmaking? Especially since not only do their squadrons of aircraft allow them to fly across the map and deal damage to, well, any ship they see, their team gets additional spotting thanks to them. Granted, at the time of recording, the CV rework is still in progress, so that could and probably will change going forward, but as is right now, that's how it works. But that is my current issue with matchmaking. I don't think some type of skill-based matchmaking is the answer, just that matchmaking needs to evolve with the game. It needs to take more into consideration, almost the ship's subtype, like if it's a hybrid ship, that needs to be a flag in matchmaking. Maybe a limit on the difference of radar ships between the two teams. Maybe they can only be a 2 radar ship difference, or maybe a 1 radar ship difference. And I get that you have to have the amount of radar ships needed in queue to balance them out. But again, when there's 6 radar ships in the game and one side has 4 of them and one side has 2 of them, and they're not in a division, that's just kind of like, how did that happen, right? Well, it happens because it doesn't take that into consideration, right? So, if you think about it, I think the last time there was a big matchmaker change was 2019, when the Kleber came out? And that was a good change, Limits are put on the amount of times a player could be up-tiered, double up-tiered. I think it was over the last 15 games, if you were up-tiered, you should only be up-tiered 40% of the time by 2 tiers, right? So your other matches should only be a 1 up-tier difference, right? Which again, that is a good change. But either way, a lot has changed since 2019. As I'm sure you are all aware. I mean, think about this game 5 years ago. I don't think we even had a hybrid ship yet. So, yeah. And then subs weren't a thing. And then all these new gimmicks and consumables weren't a thing, So it certainly has been a much evolved time, shall we say, since 2019. So that's my 2 cents on matchmaking. I don't think skill-based matchmaker is the issue. I think it just needs to evolve with the game and take more into consideration. And then 2, you have to think about, we have battleships now that at their tier, they have thin armor and low HP because they're battle cruisers. If you're getting matched in a battle cruiser against, a hardcore battleship, that can also, be detrimental to your team. But again, there are parameters and such that, they're faster and all this stuff. So, that's just my 2 cents. Again, I don't have all the answers. I'm not a game designer, but if we're talking about matchmaker and we're talking about the issues that are present with matchmaker, that's what I see as the major issues. But anyway, Let me know what you guys think about Matchmaker in the comments down below. What have your experience, your recent experiences been with Matchmaker? Have you had some really goofy games, some really unbalanced games? Share all that with me in the comments down below. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 60,000 subs. I am planning on doing a giveaway once we get there. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and hope to catch you guys in the next one.